Coming up on the DLLS Mavs Podcast, how will the Mavericks respond after falling to the Thunder in the NBA Cup, and the biggest takeaways as the Mavericks move forward? All that and more coming up next year on the DLLS Mavs Podcast. Hey, what's up, DLLS Mavs Nation? It's your man, Kevin Gray, alongside Mavericks beat writer Tim Cato, Mavericks analyst Bobby Carella. We are DLLS Mavs, your favorite guys, coming your favorite team every single day at Kevin Gray Sports, at Tim_Cato, at Bobby Carella. And you can always dial up the Stein line for our national NBA insider, Mark Stein, at the Stein line. What are the biggest takeaways from the Mavericks falling to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA Cup quarterfinal, and how they move forward as they look to get back on the winning track? Plus, we go around the association a little bit later on. Some rumors with your Dallas Mavericks when it comes to the trade market. We'll get into some of those as well. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to DLLS Sports while you are here as well, and download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. But gentlemen, we jump right into it as the Mavericks fall last night 118-104 to the Oklahoma City Thunder, snapping what was their 7-game winning streak. Unfortunately, not headed to Las Vegas. The Oklahoma City Thunder heading there. They will take on the winner of tonight's game between the Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. But some takeaways from last night's game. Let us know how you're feeling as well. What were your takeaways from the game as you've had a chance to sleep on it after our watch along as well? A successful one last night. As gentlemen, the Mavericks had their 7-game winning streak snapped at the hands of Gilgeous-Alexander in the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, it's a vibe check, right?
Yeah.
We're doing a little vibe check. Throwback to podcasts of old that I've been on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, podcasts I enjoyed listening to. My own.
That's right.
I'm making a Mark Stein joke. Or a joke for Mark Stein.
The only Mavericks podcast at that point.
So I want to start with this. Like, what do you think? What do you guys think of the idea that I've seen and heard a little bit out there that Dallas just didn't quite really look up for it? We talked a lot coming into the game that the team, you know, that there was going to be a playoff atmosphere and that people were going to feel, you know, like the stakes are going to be raised. And I would agree with what some people are saying, is that it didn't really feel like that from the Mavericks. And, you know, that's, to use a Bobby Carella word, you know, that's a little bit of hopium. I always just say copium. It's a little bit of hopium. It's like, oh, well, the Mavericks lost because, you know, they were tired. Oh, my God, they'd flown so much. And it's obviously not that simple. But I will say that, you know, that it didn't look like the most, especially the first half. It wasn't just a rousing performance from the Dallas Mavericks in terms of energy and effort and all of that.
When the Mavericks, of course, were only down by 3 at halftime after what was a disappointing performance, especially from a turnover standpoint. You look at some of the first half numbers from last night. The Mavericks were down 57-54 at halftime, but at the same time, they also had just shot 41% from three, shot 50% from the field, but the big number was the turnover problem. They had 12 turnovers in the first half, leading to what was 22 points off turnovers for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that, Bobby, really spelled trouble for them, as the takeaway from me last night was the turnovers continue to be an issue. Even when they had won 11 of 12, turnovers have been a big issue. Unfortunately, they reared their ugly head again last night. Like it's a team that loves taking the ball away against their opponent.
Yes. Sorry, my phone is going insane right now. Jeez, dude, it's been quite a day.
I thought it started and ended.
Possession to possession intensity was not there. Attention to detail was not there. Communication on defense was not there. And not to like dunk on the team or whatever, but like I agree with what Tim said. Like it just didn't seem like they were. It didn't seem like they were totally there.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like they were totally up for the fight. It's a Tuesday night in December, and you know Luke points out in the chat they've had a lot of travel and they've done all this stuff, so like there's a lot of reason for the team to be tired. And, turnovers and missed rotations, lack of communication, sloppy passes, a lot of mental errors are the signs or symptoms of being fatigued or of being just kind of over it or of not being ready to go, kind of like how I wasn't ready to go for this show. And when that happens, you're stacking the deck kind of against yourself. So this isn't making excuses and saying, oh, they'll do better next time. But it's saying, like, given the circumstances, you have to play even better than you normally would be.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be even sharper than you normally would be. You have to be even more communicative than you normally would be, because not only are you pretty tired, not only have you traveled a lot, you're playing against a team that you kind of pushed around a couple weeks ago, and you let everyone know about how you pushed them around, and the fan base calls you PJ Oklahoma, and everyone's Luka's the Thunder's daddy and all that stuff. And so the Thunder, they hear all that stuff too, and so they feel a certain kind of way about it.
They heard Nipsey Hussle apparently.
Yeah, which is like, that's a bridge too far. But like, when all of those things happen, you have to be even sharper and even more intense and even more attentive and all that stuff. And so, they just weren't, they had to play A++ to win that game, and for most of the game they were like C-.
And you want to strip away all the hopium and like turn it into an actual criticism. I thought Iztok Franco, the great Iztok Franco, digging basketball at Substack.com, I believe.
Good guy.
He made a really good point where he thought that game looked like the first game of a lot of playoff series Dallas has played, where it felt like they were feeling it out and adjusting and kind of seeing what OKC had to throw at them. But that has been a realistic criticism of Jason Kidd and Jason Kidd coach teams. It's a nitpick. It's a small criticism.
Sure.
But Dallas can't, when they go into this postseason, here in 4 or 5 months, you can't start every series down 0-1. That is not a winning strategy. And I do think that for Dallas to be able to turn it on for big games like this, I don't care about it as much. I think that there is a little bit of, you can look at what happened last night and brush aside a little bit of it. We're going to get into much deeper statistical analysis, strategic analysis of exactly what happened. But you can look at the effort and say, well, they weren't totally up for it, and so that explains some of it. But that can't be a problem once you get to the playoffs, because it has been in the past. When you have these moments that you say are playoff scenarios, when Dallas is describing this game as a playoff scenario, and then they come out and they don't look up for it, that just reminds me of all the playoff scenarios where that exact thing has happened in game one. So there is a scenario, there is something that, history isn't doomed to repeat itself, certainly not. But when I look at this game and I think about a potential playoff series against the Thunder, you can't be coming out like this in game one yet again and putting yourself behind on the back foot yet again. It did in some ways a little bit look like that.
And the energy that was not there has been personified by one PJ Washington. We mentioned it a little bit earlier, of course, missed the game last night due to illness, one that has been making its way around the Dallas Mavericks as a team. Najee Marshall, who came back after missing several games with illness of his own, had 19 points last night, speaking to the energy that wasn't there, and particularly not having PJ Washington and what that meant for last night's game. Here's what he had to say.
PJ plays a big role for us. Just like you said, a lot of times when we lack energy, he's there to pick us up, and we definitely miss him today. He hits threes, the way he rebounds, the way he guards. He's just a big body out there. We definitely missed him. Hope he get well and be back soon.
And I think that's a big takeaway as well from last night. Not just how well PJ Washington has played on both the offensive and defensive end, but the intangible stuff that he brings, and Najee Marshall speaking to some of that when it comes to his energy, when it comes to his passion on the floor, and being able to allow his teammates to feel that from him and then responding to that. That may go overlooked sometimes, but in a game where you saw Oklahoma City from the get-go bring the fight to Dallas, the Mavericks were not able to respond necessarily to the punches that Oklahoma City was throwing. PJ Washington has kind of been the guy to be able to help pick up the team from that standpoint, Bobby. And last night, they just were not able to summon that energy that they probably needed, especially when you start looking at what happened in the third quarter of last night's game.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be in a situation, though, where as a team with title hopes, like, oh, we're missing one guy, I guess we're just not going to be tough tonight. We're just going to be real, whatever. Like, You can't play that way. PJ obviously brings an edge and brings a lot of physicality and size and strength and tenacity and all that stuff. But like, whether or not PJ plays in that game is not going to help at all the kind of passes Luka was making out of those double teams.
Sure.
Or the kind of passes into traffic Kyrie was making. And, I mean, honestly, PJ probably would have got stripped just as many times as Najee did. Like, every single player on the team has to bring that intensity in that gym under those circumstances. You can't just be relying on one guy to do it for you.
And to put a finer point on this, the reason we're focusing on this game is because, as the Mavericks said, it did have a playoff intensity. It did matter. It did have stakes for huge stakes for a December regular season game. So yeah, we're gonna hyperfixate on it, and we're really gonna focus in on it because this is a potential playoff matchup that is gonna have a lot of back and forth and strategic adjustments. But ultimately, where I come down to on the vibe check, on just the vibe check, is that that was not the Dallas's best performance, and I expect to see them getting back to the team that won 11 of 12 very soon. Here coming up with their next game, it's not till Sunday. That is a nice chance to reset and regroup and get back to a winning basketball team. Kevin, you pointed this out on the pre-show. I'm stealing one of your notes, but This is only the second loss Dallas has had by double digits this entire season. This is an incredibly good basketball team that is a team that can challenge the very best teams in the league, and Oklahoma City is one of them. They didn't put out their best effort, but that is, a top 2 or, top 3 team in the NBA. And Dallas needs to be better, but they are going to be better once they, start playing, worse teams. I do expect that, the competency and the superiority that they have displayed over the past few months to easily, return. I don't have any fears or doubts about that happening. It's just that specific game is also something you learn from. You learn something from winning 11 of 12. You learn something about how good this team can be. When you lose against the top team in the Western Conference, a team that you may play in the playoffs, you also learn something about how you have to get better. You can be a very good team that also can improve. And I think that's the vibe takeaway that I had from the Mavericks perspective from last night's defeat.
And the makeup game, whether it's the Warriors or the Rockets, will be played against a team that has already beaten the Mavs this season. So even though the stakes of that game will be considerably lower because of the quality of opposition, and also there's no money on the line and blah, 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 there's still going to be a little element of payback and revenge, and the Mavs got pushed around in a big way against the Rockets a few weeks ago. And, in that Warriors game.
Speaking of a game that a team played with more energy than you, the Rockets played with a lot more energy.
That was like warning signs, in that game. Luckily, they've kind of subsided since then. But in that Warriors game, Dallas, I thought, was the better team for a lot of that game. Steph took over late, and Draymond started bullying them on defense, though. And that was, down the stretch of that game. And, that was a little bit of a reminder that, the Mavs had some way to go in terms of toughness and intensity and all that stuff, too. So either way, it's going to be a tough game, but either way is an opportunity for the Mavs to, overcome, a past failure and say, no, we're the team that we've been for the last 2 weeks, not the team that we were the other night.
And I've never been one to be the guy that's like, hey, you need to take a loss in order to reset or to learn something from a particular game. You want to win as many games as you can, particularly in this league and in this Western Conference. That is as tough as it is. But for a Mavericks team, a chance to take a step back, reflect, and obviously you think about in the big picture what the Mavericks were able to do, winning 11 out of 12 games, winning 7 straight, really putting the rest of the league on notice about what they are continuing to grow and become as a team. It was a hell of a stretch to climb out of the 5-7 hole that they had started themselves in. And last night we had talked about it going into the game, kind of a measuring stick game against arguably the best team in the Western Conference, and along with Cleveland and Boston, one of the 3-4 best teams in the entire league. And last night, Oklahoma City did what they were capable of and did it at an extremely high level. The Mavericks were not able to respond to it. Now you have a better feel of what this Oklahoma City team is going to be, especially with the additions of Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein and others. Now the Mavericks have a really good opportunity to be able to move forward and play some better basketball going forward from there. But I'll say, look, it's a loss against a really good team. It's going to happen in this league, and the Mavericks unfortunately came up on the short end of last night, but things to be able to be learned going forward as the Mavericks get ready to get back on the floor on Sunday, whether it be against the Rockets or the Warriors. We will know that after tonight's quarterfinal game between those two teams to see who advances to Las Vegas. Coming up next here on the DLLS Mavs podcast, we jump into Cato's Corner, how Oklahoma City's roster changes have changed how they attack the Dallas Mavericks and what that means for these two teams who hope to see each other down the road. All that coming up next here on the DLLS Mavs podcast. But first, let me talk to you about Sleeper. Sleeper, the best fantasy league out there when it comes to their platform, now allows you to put your ball knowledge to the test by picking whether your favorite or least favorite players will have more or less than their projected stats each week. If you took Lukadoncic to have more than 20 points last night, unfortunately, he didn't come up big for you, but at the same time, others did, like Gilgeous-Alexander. If you took him to have more than 30, he definitely...
Spencer!
Oh, yeah, Bobby was not able to capitalize on Spencer Dinwiddie. He did not necessarily do what he had to do to help out our guy, Bobby Carella. But with Sleeper, the more picks you combine, the more you can win. So maybe you need to combine some more picks next time, Bobby, so that you can win all the way up to 100 times your money. Sleeper keeps you in the loop with instant alerts for breaking news and major injuries as well, so you can stay ahead of the game and keep track of league updates in real time, so you're always informed and ready to outsmart your friends. So if you think you have what it takes, download the Sleeper app and use code DLLS Mavs. For a limited time, new users can now get their first deposit matched 100% up to $1,500, the largest deposit offer match ever. So terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. And check out Sleeper today.
With Empire today, if you want to ball up on the floor and cry after the Mavs lose a tough one to OKC, well, it's going to be a really comfy floor, and you can save some money as you install it because you can schedule a free and no estimate today and use promo code DLLS to save yourself $350. Now, you might be asking yourself, a floor sounds good, but like it's kind of tough to visualize what that floor would look like in my living room or in my kitchen.
And how you would look balled up on the floor.
How am I going to look while I'm sobbing? Well,
yeah.
They have a virtual floor designer,
ball.
so you can assume the fetal position, hold your phone up, take a selfie, and boom, you'll see how that floor will look in your crying cage with your decor, with your lighting, with your tears on that floor. And you'll also see how it won't stain that beautiful wood that you can get from Empire today. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. Again, save $350 off. Use promo code DLLS. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/DLLS for details.
About to jump into Cato's Corner here in just a moment as the Oklahoma City Thunder's roster changes and how that affects how they attack Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks after the Mavericks lost last night, 118-104. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's 39 points, the high mark for the game last night. The Mavericks unfortunately continue to turn the ball over too much as well, as they turned the ball over 19 times, which was the number of the night last night, as the Oklahoma City Thunder were a plus 19 when it came to points off those turnovers as well. Luka Doncic, who Luka and Kyrie Irving were held to under 20 points together for the first time this season in the same game, spoke last night about the Mavericks turnovers and specifically his and how that affected last night's game. Take a listen.
Yeah, just sloppy passes for me. Just gotta take care of the ball. You know, can't be having 6 turnovers. It's unacceptable for my part.
And Tim Cato, based off of the way that the Oklahoma City Thunder were attacking both Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, had a lot to do with the personnel that the Thunder throw out there and what that means for how they will attack the Mavericks' 2 stars, especially offensively going forward here.
Yeah, so Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso are 2 obviously huge additions, big new pieces for Oklahoma City. So, you know, I think this is so interesting because we have a 6-game sample size of how these 2 teams played against each other. And Oklahoma City, in a lot of ways, used the same strategy. You know, we talk about Dallas, and Dallas did really too. So Dallas does a good job walling off the paint. And on last night's show, we talked about how the Oklahoma City's offense responded by just taking those threes, saying, okay, you got us, we'll take the threes. The Oklahoma City defense, you know, they want to take away isolations for the superstars, and they want to take away. They also want to take away shots at the rim, and they're going to do that by conceding shots from the corners. Dallas took a fair number as they did during the playoff series, and one thing Dallas did in the playoff series was offensive rebound. You know, in the wins, so the league average offensive rating or offensive rebounding percentage is 24-25. When these 2 teams won in that playoff series last year, the offensive rebounding for Dallas was 34, so about 10 percentage points better. For Oklahoma City in their 2 wins, it was 35%, so about 12 percentage points better than league average. And I think what we saw, even though we talked about this last night, Hartenstein was a minus. He was a -6 when he was on the court. So in a lot of ways, Dallas was actually doing pretty well when he was on the court, when they had a big man, a traditional big man to sag off of. But I do think in the past, that has been, he kind of neutralized things. So like -6 is, that is, if you escalate that out, even though individual plus minus for any single game is not perfect. Yes, Dallas is on pace to win that game. But I do think those minutes with a true center really neutralize that advantage for Dallas, which just put a lot of pressure on their offense that they were going to have to be efficient. They, both in turnovers and in shot making, because they weren't going to get those second chance points nearly as often. So that stood out to me. Let's see. I thought, because of that, Dallas is always going to, when you're sending doubles at Kyrie and Luka, yes, Oklahoma City is going to give up the corners to an extent, but they're also going to bait the ball going into the big men inside. And I thought Derek Lively did not handle that very well in the first half. And, they just have swarming. They have so many swarming defenders with, Bobby was going wild about it last night, about keep the ball high. And I think that's something you can learn. But it's a reasonable thing to do to kind of bait, those centers into that. Derek Lively specifically, amazing player. By no means, I would definitely not say he is regressed whatsoever this season. But I would say he hasn't taken that sophomore step forward yet. He's been really inconsistent when it comes to fouls and just sometimes impact. Sometimes he can float through a game, not quite as impactful as he was like against the Thunder just last playoff series, where I thought he was the best big man on the court.
Dude, he was the best player in that series.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes
along with PJ, yeah.
And so this is an assessment of where Derek Lively is. Obviously, the team's in a good spot. We already covered that.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the reasons to have the highest hopes that Dallas can be a title contender is that Derek Lively is going to improve. Quite frankly, he might start improving next week. It might start being more consistent. It's not that we haven't seen any improvement. It's that it hasn't happened consistently. But I thought for him to be that player against the Thunder, and now you have a slightly different look. You bring in another, just really pesky ball hand, perimeter defender in Caruso who can bite down and really frustrate and be a nuisance in those situations to players, to like big men who are not expecting that. You add someone like Hartenstein who is just gonna muck things up, and that's now a big player that Lively has to account for. I thought that we saw his influence, his impact a little bit diminished, and that's something that I'm just watching. Again, just kind of weird start from him. Yeah. I'm expecting huge things from him. Nothing has changed about my analysis of Derek Lively, but I do think if you kind of look at the whole of his season, he has been he hasn't taken that leap yet. And even if he doesn't take that leap, really I just want to get him. I want him to get back to where he was in the postseason, and we've seen it for games. It was Memphis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, against Memphis, like it was on full display. He's had other games where that's on full display.
Denver game,
he was very good against Denver.
Yeah. It's hard to have a quiet 13 rebound, 5 assist game, and Lively had that last night with the 5 points.
So I think that's one area.
Yeah.
I thought Quentin Grimes, that was one of his worst games of the season, and I think you do see a little bit when it comes to a coach being a little bit hesitant, a DMP, or sometimes, not really letting his minutes, it feels like he has a quicker hook. But I thought you saw why in tonight's game. There's some polishing to his game. I think he's a very good role player. I think he can develop into an even better role player for the team. But you know what he looked like last night? He kind of looked like Dante Exum in the postseason. Kind of looked like one of those, like he was having that same jarring reaction. And we have mostly seen this version of Quentin Grimes against really good teams. He's been awesome filling in big roles. He's been mostly very good against bad teams. But I thought he looked a little bit like Dante Exum, where he just wasn't quite ready for the moment, that he was a little bit sloppy, a little bit all over the place. I don't know if, how much you guys, I know how much you guys saw that. I mean, you were watching the same game as me. But that's an area where I see, watching that performance of Quentin Grimes, you're like, okay, I'm starting to see what Jason Kidd saw that led to that has led to a bit of distrust of him in an expanded role at points this season.
He was the only starter not to play more than 20 minutes last night. Quentin Grimes in 18 minutes went 1 of 5, had 3 turnovers, was a -10, only had 4 points. Again, the only starter that played, in fact, less than 25 minutes was Quentin Grimes last night in the 18 minutes that he played. against Oklahoma City, just kind of underscoring some of the difficulties that he was dealing with in what was a ferocious lineup that the Thunder were putting out there against him last night.
So I think if you're gaming all of this out, if you're trying to piece this all together, OKC. So how do you get OKC out of this defensive shell if that's how they're going to choose to play?
I wouldn't say it's a shell.
Or not a shell. You're right.
It's aggressive.
Yeah, it's a.
That's who they are. That's who they are.
How do you fully get them out of this game plan?
You got to be crisp with the ball, man. That's it.
Yeah,
crisp passes.
It starts with that. You need more. You need more from the corners. You know, like you really, and maybe they're just going to give that up the entire time. But you definitely need more crispness. You need more from the role players. Dallas went out and got a supporting cast for Luka that is more competent on the ball. We've talked a lot about that. I thought Najee showed exactly how. If you inserted Najee into last year's playoff series, like, oh my goodness, like he would have thrived then. He thrived last night. He was very good in the first meeting against Oklahoma City. But you need that from everybody. There can't be a weak link. Quentin Grimes is somebody who needs to find a level of consistency and competency against the very best teams in the league. You need to be able to trust him to be secure with the ball. You need to be able to trust him to hit threes. When quick threes, quick relocation threes, when those double teams come at the players, because I do think at some point Dallas's offense is gonna have to scare Oklahoma City away from sending all those double teams. There's almost no team in the NBA. We talk about this a lot. We typically think it is suicidal for an opposing defense to double Kyrie, but especially to double Luka-Doncic. And they kind of pulled it off last night.
Yeah, I think with how uniquely tenacious they are, it's really tough to have a big man out there, like a non-shooting big out there, because if you are able to break down that perimeter defense, you're getting in the lane and there's just even more people standing around there to where your passing windows are super small. Generally big guys, most of them don't have very soft hands, so that pass has to be nice and gentle right in the pocket. And that's where Alex Caruso is going to stick his paw. They committed a ton of turnovers trying to throw over the top or underneath to the bigs. They committed a ton of turnovers driving into traffic because you have a big standing right at the rim. So you either have to play 5 out or your passing better be effing perfect. And
they don't have a stretch 5 to be able to stretch the floor in a lot of ways.
Maxey is a stretch 5 by name only at this point.
Yes.
Right. He wasn't available last night. PJ,
right.
It would have been nice to see them try PJ lineup, but he wasn't available either.
I think this is an area where you could have expected Lively, and there's so much season left. This is an area where I do think Lively could keep getting better at. He has obviously shown that he's really competent in that short role at making the right decisions and making the right reads. You got to be on another level. You got to take it to another level. You have to be even better about receiving the ball in that area and then instantly. It's basically a 1-2. It's a catch, turn, hit the corner shooter. Because they're going to be collapsing in.
In a series when you can expect that, I think we might see that. But just in a regular season game, you have no time to prep. Like you're just not going to get there
right
in 30 minutes. But hopefully the next time they play, they're a little more ready for it. And then hopefully in a series, they would be like, okay, game 1 might be weird, but then after that, now we know. We know what we got to do.
And I'll say this too. I mean, obviously your role players have got to be able to show up, especially in big games like this against a very talented Oklahoma City Thunder team. But for me, I mean, your superstar can't turn the ball over 6 times. I mean, Bobby, you lamented it last time during the watch along, the amount of throw ahead passes that Luka-Doncic continued to throw in transition where it just wasn't even close to the target that he was trying to
OKC
hit.
Was prepared for those.
They were, and they turned him over quite a bit. But in a game where you know that you've got to have other guys perform, the tone has to be set with your superstar. I mean, you give Oklahoma City credit for the way that they got after Luka and Kyrie, but your superstar has to be the one to be able to respond, especially when the other one on the other side is going ham with the efficiency going for 39. Your superstar's got to find some measure of response, and unfortunately that was not the case last night from 77. So if we're going to treat him like the superstar that he is, you got to respond to what the other superstar is doing on the other side, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander put his stamp on this game, unlike 77 last night, unfortunately.
Kyrie, even plus minus. Dinwiddie, -1. Luka, -14.
Yeah.
And generally, you got 2 of those on the court at all times. Luka was the only one that was that negative. Rough night at the barn for him.
Yeah, just unacceptable from 77. And he took some of the accountability for that last night in terms of his performance, obviously talking about the 6 turnovers that he had that he just simply cannot have against a team that is known for turning you over in that way. Appreciate Tim leading us through Cato's Corner there. Make sure you check out all of anything that you may have missed, not only on our show, but also on the podcast as well by downloading and subscribing to the podcast.
I'll get to that next segment. Don't you wait.
Wherever you get your podcast for free. Yes, when it comes to some potentially point of attack defense for your Dallas Mavericks. Coming up next here on the DLLS Mavs podcast, we go around the association. The NBA trade rumor season is heating up already, and your Dallas Mavericks are in conversations. Which ones? We'll discuss that, plus some news when it comes to the former legend and champion Dirk Nowitizki as well. All that and more coming up next year on the DLLS Mavs podcast.
Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product, rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. One thing I really like about Shady Rays is that if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by a lost or broken replacement. If you don't love your shades, exchange for a new pair, or return worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deals of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code DLLS for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
It's the holiday season, and what better gift to give a loved one or a friend than an opportunity to go to their favorite team's basketball game, football game, or go in to see Wicked as well. And when it comes to going to the movie theater, you can do that with Game Time. Game Time focusing on what is most important to you, which is enjoying yourself and having a good time at your favorite events. Like me, I'm going to WrestleMania in April at Allegiant Stadium, and Game Time was able to help me get my tickets with panoramic seat view, so I knew exactly where I was going to sit before I picked my tickets, all in pricing as well, so I knew how much I was going to pay before I officially checked out when it came to my tickets. And they've got the lowest price guarantee as well, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code DLLS for $20 off your first purchase. And remember, terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code DLLS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Gentlemen, what time is it?
Game time.
Okay, we didn't have Cat today.
Woo.
All right, cool. It's fine. Let's go around the association here on the DLLS Mavs podcast. The Mavericks will have a few days off as they await who their opponent will be as the NBA Cup continues tonight. The Rockets taking on the Golden State Warriors. The winner of that game will face the Oklahoma City Thunder in Las Vegas. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Conference side, the Milwaukee Bucks are waiting to see who will win tonight's game between the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. The winner of that game will go to Vegas. Both of those semifinal games will be played on Saturday, with the NBA Cup title game being played on Tuesday night. So the Mavericks, who of course lost last night, they will play their next game, as Tim mentioned a little bit earlier, on Sunday. That will be either here against the Houston Rockets or on the road, Klay Thompson, for a second time to take on the Golden State Warriors.
Another time zone change. Don't do this to me. Don't do it to me.
Do we have kind of an idea on the times of those potential games?
I've heard either 5:30 or 6:30, depending on which location.
Okay. So just kind of sets your calendar a little bit just to know that the Mavericks' next game will be on Sunday, either on the road against Golden State or at home against the Houston Rockets. Either way, a team that the Mavericks have lost to before, they'll be looking to avenge those early season losses. But let's jump into it, fellas, as it's unofficially trade season in the NBA. Trade rumors already starting to be bandied about, and your Dallas Mavericks are in those conversations already. ESPN Shams Charania reporting that Jimmy Butler has 3 teams on his list that he wouldn't mind going to in terms of a win-now situation. That includes the Houston Rockets, the Golden State Warriors, and yes, your Dallas Mavericks. The Heat apparently are willing to entertain offers for the 35-year-old who is continuing to play pretty well as of late for the Miami Heat, as, of course, Jimmy Butler took the Miami Heat to 2 NBA Finals, one in the bubble, losing to the Lakers, and, of course, losing to Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. But the Houston, Texas native may be on the move, gentlemen. Your thoughts on the Mavericks being one of the teams that Jimmy Butler, Jimmy Buckets, as some may call him, has the Mavericks on his list?
Well, similar to Jimmy Butler, I have an announcement I would like to make. I am on the dating market, and Dua Lipa, you are on my list.
Oh, wow.
So just a heads up, Dua Lipa, hit me up. I am interested in dating you. It seems great from my end.
Hey, look, I respect it. Shoot your shot, Tim Cato. Shoot your shot. You have
Does
not
it make
because you
sense
asked
for
not.
your
I'll be a
end?
big fan of the pod. I mean,
Yeah, I think she listens every day.
Tanner, I'm gonna need you to clip that. Make sure you tag Dua Lipa and make sure that that request gets to her somehow at some point.
that is very normal behavior.
Hey, look, you know
Also,
what?
it was
Hey,
a
You're on
bit.
my list.
you got anybody else you got to shoot your shot at?
Also,
Yeah.
if we're actually posting on social media, this was a bit. I'm single-ish, so
Okay.
Oh, wow. So you just set your relationship on fire by doing. Okay, Tim, good job.
You're a
Good
little
job.
more single now than you were 30
You about to
seconds
be a
ago.
lot more single, my guy, after what you just pulled just now. You probably should have thought about that before you said that out loud for the masses because, oh, my gosh.
I'm sorry. Was the point not obvious? It is cute that Jimmy Butler has the Dallas Mavericks on their list. There is no reason for them
You
to
might
be
want to talk to
interested.
your partner about what you might feel like the content was on there. I'm just joking. Just kidding.
She doesn't listen.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
Wow.
she should be a little more single too.
Right. I love how this is divulged into Tim Cato's personal relationship. That's funny.
Single-ish, you know.
I have a Jimmy Butler take.
Okay.
I think the Mavs would be really, really, really good with Jimmy Butler. I think he's a great.
Oh.
I think he's a great player. I think that he is. He's a better version of Najee Marshall on offense, and he is unlike anything they have on defense. Point
He's
of
a
attack,
dogged
wing.
competitor. He's a real tough
Yeah,
competitor.
he's really good. He's
Yeah.
really good. Unfortunately,
You
there
think
are-
at this point of his career, you still think he's a, like a better point of attack defender than anybody
currently on the
Mavericks?
team?
Yeah.
Yes. When he's locked in.
When he's locked in.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of rules in the NBA, and if this was a situation where there weren't aprons and there weren't a lot of restrictions, then it would be much easier for the Mavs to pull off a trade like that. But the Mavs are super close to the first apron. They are like less than $2 million away from the first apron, and they are hard capped at
It's
the first
actually
apron.
less than that.
Yeah, so they would have to give up essentially a dollar for dollar match for Butler's contract, and that is really, really tough to pull off just because it's hard to stack up a bunch of contracts to make it equal $48.7 million.
The plan is tomorrow we're going to get more into the minutia with a cap expert.
Yeah,
So-
I mean,
to
be fair, this isn't minutia though. This is just general.
no.
Sure, if in a world where
We'll get into the
contracts didn't
minutia
exist.
of why it is the way
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
and the specifics of that.
Yeah, but it's really hard for the Mavericks to do that while still having a team.
So
basically.
forget the salary cap. Is there, pretend in a perfect role, if you could just exchange, this is a hypothetical. What do you think of just the fit of Jimmy Butler on the Dallas Mavericks?
Oh, I love it.
If you were to trade Najee straight up for Jimmy Butler plus a first-round pick, pretending the salary cap actually
oh my God,
allowed that.
that would be
Yeah?
incredible.
With all due respect, I love Najee Marshall, but I mean,
Jimmy is amazing.
I would
He's an
probably
amazing
do
player,
that. Yeah.
and he's like a freakazoid competitor.
yes.
Which is
Energy would not be a problem on a night-to-night basis with Jimmy Butler on your squad.
He's really good. He's just really good, but he's 35 or 36 or something, and pretty extensive injury history, and makes a lot of money. And this is the last year of his deal, so any team that trades for him is probably gonna have to lob him a contract extension, and that is not necessarily a good idea when you're about to give Luka $350 million. So
and you got to pay Kyrie as well next summer. And by the way,
there's a lot of reasons to say
The
no.
more I think
Yeah.
about this, the more I agree. My initial reaction was they don't need another scorer like that, and the inconsistency of his, sometimes inconsistency of his defense. I do think it slipped a little bit more, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. It's not like I'm watching Miami night in and night out. Yes, he can be a very good point of attack defender. I don't think he's ever been, like an all defense adjacent type of guy. Maybe what you're saying is that when he wants to be, he can. And the more I think about this, the more, like in Miami, he's averaging 11 shots a game. that is not a ball dominant star who demands
that's a career
touches.
low for him at this point in his career.
Ever since he really started playing, his first season, his second season when he was a full-time starter, yes, it's by far a season low. And I do agree. Like, I think the Najee comparison is apt. He's somebody who kind of gets buckets, he gets buckets against the grain of the flow of the offense, but they make sense. Does that make sense? Where he's just going to find a moment where he can post up and go put the ball in at a very efficient rate. He's going to find moments where you're running your offensive schemes, and then all of a sudden he sees a driving lane, and he's going to get that. He's very good as he is like as a fast break player. He's like a football player, where he will literally go high point a contested jump ball and finish over you. He really does. Like, I do love the way he plays in those ways. If it's not really a practical trade at all for Dallas, but you have convinced me a little bit, or I guess now that I've put a little bit more thought into this, I see how it would fit if it was practical.
He's a great player.
Yeah, I mean, he's a terrific. Butler's one of those guys. He's one of the best players in recent memory for me. That's like, hey, don't take that shot, but then it goes in. It's like, that's a great shot, Jimmy. Great shot. Like, I think about some of the playoff games where he's pulling up against the Milwaukee Bucks in transition. Hey, Jimmy, you probably shouldn't take that three right now. And then he hits it. It's like, okay, great shot, Jimmy. No problem. And the crowd goes nuts. Like, he's a fierce competitor that will add a lot of intensity to this team. But as Bobby mentioned, the finances can be quite hazardous when it comes to a Luka getting paid, a Kyrie Irving getting paid. Jimmy Butler also has a $52 million player option for the 25-26 season.
There is a guy for whom that is not the case, though.
And I'm thinking you're talking about Herb Jones. Is that who you're talking about?
I might be.
From the New Orleans Pelicans. Apparently, betting odds say that the Dallas Mavericks
I
are
got
the
him here.
betting favorite to.
So this is from Bovada Official. Now, I don't condone gambling, blah, 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 blah. Dallas Mavericks are the favorites to land Herb Jones in a potential trade. Dallas Mavericks plus 350. Memphis Grizzlies plus 400. Milwaukee Bucks plus 450. We also got the Rockets, Lakers, Thunder, Clippers, Pacers, and Heat. So basically the whole NBA. You can just bet on all those guys. But the Mavericks are the betting favorites right now. So I took a look.
How much does that mean?
That means as much as you want it to. How about that? You can tell me how much water's in the glass, but Herb Jones, $12.9 million salary this year, is under contract for 2 more years after this one. So he is considered – part of the reason that he's considered so valuable is because he's a good player. But let's be honest, most of the reason he's considered so valuable is because he makes $12.9 million a year for the next 3 years. So he is locked into a very team-friendly contract, much like Dorian Finney-Smith was whenever he was at his peak value, which was equivalent to Kyrie Irving. And now Dorian is still potentially worth a first-rounder because he's on a similar number to Herb. Now, I know we got to hit a break soon, but I just want to lay out the most realistic salary matching on the Mavs. Actually, Daniel Gafford, who makes $13.3 million and plays center. The Pelicans need bigs. I don't think that I'm trading Herb Jones for Daniel Gafford, but the Mavs also have a first-rounder. The Mavs have this Sixers a second-rounder. Mavs have a couple young guys that could maybe influence the Pelicans to say yes a little more if they really want to do it. The question, I think, for me is not the on-court fit, because I think the on-court fit is amazing. Herb Jones, a 3-and-D player. Those guys fit anywhere and everywhere with any kind of player. But the question is it worth essentially transforming who you are by giving up size for a wing in order to make a trade like that happen? I think that's kind of what I'm thinking. And also giving up a 1 or maybe 2 or maybe a 1 and a 2 or maybe 2 1s or something. Like, you're going to have to give up more than just Gafford.
Who just scored 39 points last night against Dallas?
Herb Jones?
No.
Oh.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander lit
Jimmy
him
Butler
up for 39 last night. Imagine Herb Jones guarding SGA in a 7-game series.
Here's the thing.
I would love to see some of that.
He did last year and they got swept. Najee did a better job against Shai than Herb. Or did Herb Jones even play in that series? That's a genuine question. Everyone on the team gets hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Najee did the best job against Shai in that series last year.
So I got Najee and Herb Jones this time around. That'd be pretty nice. And if we're talking about Lively having to make improvements to continue to show that second-year leap, and if we believe in Maxey still as a defender, I got my starting 5 and I got a versatile backup 5 if I have to move on from Gafford to be able to get a point of attack defender like Herb Jones. I might be willing to make that trade-off if the Maxey thing from a defensive standpoint is where it needs to be. I wouldn't mind making that.
Let's come back to this. Let's hit the break. And keep talking about this one. Because this is the one I think this is like Mavs fans' dreams.
No, it definitely is. I've seen a lot in the chat so far as Herb Jones being the ideal fit for the Dallas Mavericks. More on what these names that are being bantied about for the Mavericks means in terms of their stature in the league. And plus, we'll take some of your questions in the chat as well. All that coming up next year on the DLLS Mavs Podcast.
First, let me tell you a little bit more about what we're doing here at DLLS Sports. So we got pregame and postgame coverage for every team in town and more on the way, including the number one pick having Dallas Wings. We are also doing daytime shows. We got us going right now. We got Stars hanging out in the studio adjacent to ours, prepping to do their show. We got Rangers out at the winter meetings, gathering content, doing interviews. They're going to be in later today with the report. And they were up late last night, burning the midnight oil on an emergency pod, celebrating Uvalde.
Evo's
signing
back
with the team, and then the Rangers just traded for a big hunk of meat, Jake Berger. They got all sorts. They got all sorts of that analysis coming. But if you want to gain access to some premium stuff that you're not going to find on YouTube for free, then you can scan that QR code right there. You can go to the link in the description, or you can just go to alldlls.com/diehard, where for less than $7 you become a diehard. What happens when you become a diehard? Well, you gain access to our entire website, all the premium written content for folks like Tim Cato on Mavs, Clarence Hill, Joe Hoyt on Cowboys. We got Sam Nessler, Sean Spear on Stars, Jeff Wilson on Rangers, and again, more coming soon. You also get to join the DLLS Discord server where you can ask Luds anything. Shout out Luds.
Shout out Luds.
You can get John Anderson's take on Star Wars movies, and he's got a lot of them, even though he prefaces every Star Wars take with, I don't really like talking about Star Wars on the internet, and then he proceeds to have an hour-long conversation about Star Wars. You can also ask Tim what it's like to watch a basketball game with me. Spoiler, it's annoying. And much more.
Oh, wow.
You also get a free shirt when you sign up, and you get a discount
on
any other shirts and merch that you want to buy.
Get out of here,
discount
John.
on live events. We got some live events coming down the pipeline.
We're talking about a different John.
And a whole lot more. You get a physical Die Hard card too. So
I'm talking about John Anderson. He used to work for ESPN, not you.
So yeah, if you want to do that, that would help us a lot. And shout out to Rhonda and Dan who have signed up to become diehards today. Shout out Rhonda and Dan. Thank you all for your support.
And get that physical Die Hard card as well. Physical Die Hard card.
Can I go very briefly back to Jake Berger?
Yes.
That sounds like what Dirk Nowitizki is going to call a player whose name he forgot. Just another guy, a jag. He's like, well, Jake Berger over there is really not moving his slide at his feet well defensively. He looks like me in my retirement season.
I've
had a Jake Berger before.
A burger from Jake's?
Yeah.
As we finish up here on the DLLS Mavs Podcast.
Apostrophes matter.
Into some more of the trade names that are being bandied about by your Dallas Mavericks. And yes, as Tim Cato brings up, legend Dirk Nowitizki, our very own Mark Stein. You can always dial up the Stein line at the Stein line on X, reporting that Basketball Hall of Famer and NBA champion Dirk Nowitizki is nearing a deal to join Amazon's Prime Video coverage of the NBA starting next season and launch his broadcasting career, sources telling our own Mark Stein. So the 14-time NBA All-Star and Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer, and of course, Finals MVP, 07 League MVP, Dirk Nowitizki, set to begin his broadcasting career. Of course, Amazon having a set of games, package of games that they have been able to sign up with in terms of the NBA. It appears Dirk Nowitizki is going to be part of Amazon Prime Video coverage. Are you excited to see Dirk calling games in the association?
Are we excited? What do you think? No, I don't want to. I don't want the funniest Dallas Mavericks legend. No, I don't want to watch him more.
It was literally just a question to get you to respond to how you felt about it, and you did exactly what I need you to do. Appreciate that.
I would like to see Dirk Nowitizki call games.
That's good.
Yeah, it'd be great.
That's good.
More Dirk is always good.
I would like to see Amazon hire Jeff Van Gundy to be the third man in the booth.
You going to get him off the bench from
no,
I
just want Jeff Van Gundy and Dirk Nowitizki interacting.
Of course, Jeff Van Gundy, assistant coach right now with the Los Angeles Clippers, alongside Ty Lue, their defensive coordinator out there. Speaking of defense, we were talking about Herb Jones potentially being a fit for the Dallas Mavericks as trade rumors continue to swirl. Some folks in the chat would love to see a Herb Jones in a Dallas Mavericks uniform, some wanting a stretch five for the Dallas Mavericks, as well as we kind of start to look at the NBA trade rumors that are continuing to swirl about. Obviously, December 15th is a big date in the association. That's when teams can start trading players that signed with their team during the summer as well. So there's a lot of players that are eligible to be traded as we start looking at that. Starts on December the 15th. Go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
I'll say this about Herb Jones and potential fit on the Mavericks and kind of just their defense. I would say my view of the Mavericks defense is that they have one thing they're missing and one limitation in spite of that. The thing they're missing is that they don't have an elite point of attack defender. I thought Derrick Jones Jr. was a defense, all defense team short list kind of guy when it came to his point of attack defense, the way that he, got around screens, the way that he could just smother players. I thought, Najee Marshall did play a really good defensive series against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I thought when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was playing against Derrick Jones Jr. last season in that playoff series, that was the one guy who could slow him. And I thought he just did a really impressive job. And I don't think Dallas has that this season with any of their guys. They got a lot of competent guys who fight on that end and do an average to above average job. They don't have anybody like that. And Herb Jones is that type of player. Herb Jones is literally an all-defense team player. He would be the first actual all-defense guy or guy coming off an all-defense season in Dallas since it was before Tyson Chandler, right? Because Tyson Chandler didn't make it with Dallas.
Pretty
Something
sure he
like
did.
that. Or he did make it that one championship season.
Second team,
He won DPO Defensive Player of the Year the following season. But that's, I guess, something, adding defensive players, adding elite perimeter defense, point of attack defense, that makes you a better defense. That makes you a better unit on that end. I do think it's something Dallas is lacking. I do think it's something that Herb Jones could provide. The flip side of that is that if you bring and play better defensive players, your defense will be better. But Dallas is still going to have this limitation, which is because they switch so much, because that's their chosen style, you're always going to be limited by how much your non-defending, non-defense focused players rise to the occasion. And so while I do think Herb Jones would make the team better defensively, a lot of this is still going to depend on how much every single night in a playoff context that Luka and Kyrie and Klay, and I think Klay's been good defensively for the most part this season, but how much they rise to the occasion. So I don't know. I'm split on it. I think that if it came down to it, there's probably a lot of, if I was in charge of the decision, there's probably a lot of deals that I would make, that I would pull the trigger on for Herb Jones. I do think that he would help this team. I like him as a competent enough offensive player that I would trust him in a playoff series. I think his three-pointer, his shooting, his just overall offensive feel is like a little bit beyond what Derrick Jones brought last season when he kind of faded out of a roster. And I think if you were to trade for that, were to trade for Herb Jones, you would be committing to playing a lot of small ball five, a lot of times him or PJ as the five, whether that means specifically that you don't have a backup center or what have you. But I think there's, I guess, like I said, there's a lot of scenarios where I'd do it, but
Sure.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around like what this Dallas defense can be and just how much he would impact it.
They're 8th in the NBA right now.
Right.
So it stands to reason they'd get better
Yeah.
if they did that.
Let me ask you this real quick, Bobby. In terms of, as we're talking about NBA, trades and obviously, some of the names that are out there, when you start looking at this Mavericks roster, outside of Luka and Kyrie, who is untouchable on this roster? If a team calls you and says, hey, I'm looking to do a deal with you, who is off limits? Obviously, Luka and Kyrie are the two most prominent names. Who is off limits for you when it comes to the Mavericks?
I mean, it depends on who they're trading for. Like if Giannis is like, hey, Dallas, come get me, then is Kyrie untouchable in that? I mean, then nobody's untouchable, but
he's probably untouchable in the same way that Klay Thompson is untouchable. Nico Harrison and the front office has built a place that players want to come play. And if you...
Yeah, optically, trading Klay would be a huge L.
Trading Klay or trading Kyrie. And I know you're just saying hypotheticals, but realistically, from the human standpoint, from the organizational standpoint, that you have finally created a culture and a system a team, an environment that people want to come to. Jimmy Butler, case in point, you just can't bail on them. You can't. So I would say there is no scenario in my head where obviously Luka, but also Kyrie or Klay are moved. I
don't think any team in the NBA wants to trade for Klay, honestly.
Right.
Like, that would give up because the Mavericks would be looking for a comparable player at a comparable position.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a team want to trade for Klay if they have Herb Jones? Now, pretty much nobody else. I mean, I'm down to talk lively. If you got an all-star that's of a good age, there's not many players I would trade lively for. But okay, Herb Jones in particular. The player that realistically would be in that trade from the Mavs standpoint, unless it's Maxey plus Omax, and the Pelicans want some youth or something, or Maxey plus Hardy or something like that, is Gafford. Gafford was not super impactful in the OKC series. Gafford was not impactful at all against Boston. Those are the two best teams in the league. Those are the teams that you're probably going to have to beat to win the championship. And if you have a player that you're about to have to give an extension to this summer, or he's going to walk next summer, and he's not going to play against the two best teams in the league, then I'm down to trade him for a player that will play against those two teams. Like, this is just a simple, now what you would be losing in that specific trade, if it's Gafford and a pick for Herb Jones or whatever, is Gafford beats the crap out of bad teams. He punishes rookies. He destroys bad teams. And throughout a lot of the Luka era, the Mavs have been kind of play with their food guys against bad teams. Gafford doesn't play with his food against bad teams. That's when he eats. All right, he eats against the bums. And so, that is an element that you'd be missing. And also, the Mavs' identity now is so deeply rooted in we're bigger and stronger than you. Gafford is big, strong, mean, and nasty and physical, at both ends of the floor. And so, you wouldn't be able to necessarily replace that unless you then go out and try and trade for a big. Generally speaking, the old adage goes you don't trade a big guy for a small guy because it's tougher to find good big guys than it is to find small guys. It's like you don't ever trade a pitcher for a hitter because it's tougher to find a good pitcher. You don't ever trade a quarterback for a linebacker.
Bobby, my gosh, man.
But
he's not beating the allegations that he doesn't know baseball now in football as well.
Would you trade a striker for a center back?
No, absolutely not.
Imagine if soccer had trades.
You need a goal scorer.
You really
They
know
do in the
more
MLS.
than you will let on when it comes to other sports. You got to stop here.
But
Would you?
the Mavs have so many guards. They have so many guards who, when this team
Ton
is
of
healthy,
guards.
like, dude, Hardy and Exum and Dinwiddie, they have too many of those guys. So you can't tell me that there's not some young big or some dude that's just kind of wasting away on a roster that the Mavs could then turn around and flip one of those guys for. Like, I can't believe that wouldn't be the case. So you would have to do some other sort of move because you cannot go through the rest of the season with Derek Lively, who misses a lot of games, Dwight Powell, who's getting up there, and Maxi Kleber, who misses even more games than Lively, as your only bigs. Because then all of a sudden you're facing a real crunch. Mm-hmm. So it's not as simple as, let's just make the trade. Now we're going to win the title. There would have to be some follow-up move. But if I'm Dallas, I would absolutely explore doing that.
Saw some chatter in the chat about whether the team would trade or not trade the first-round picks. There's a few people arguing that they should not trade first-round picks. I think at this point, everything's on the table when it comes to picks. You trade it. Klay Thompson specifically, if you go sign a 35-year-old for 3 years, that is committing to winning now. Championship chances at championships are fleeting. I don't really think. Also, I'm pretty sure the front office also views it this way. They have the short-term maximization of winning a title now, which is a perfectly reasonable stance to have.
And let me add one more thing to
they
that.
have in mind.
So dovetailing off of that, you give Klay a 3-year deal. A player like Herb Jones has 3 years left in his contract. So when it comes time to we got to give Herb Jones money or let him go, Klay all of a sudden is probably retiring or playing for the minimum or something. Kyrie reportedly 2-3 year extension is what McMahon or Stein and all them have kind of alluded to or whatever. Like, it's not like Kyrie's going to sign a 5-year deal. So, everything that they're doing is and that's also when Lively's rookie deal expires. Like,
that's
everything is kind of lining up to where that's after the 26-27 season, all this stuff clears off the books and goes away. that is your window.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that, it's like, all right, it's time to change the face of this.
And if you win a championship before that, you have a lot more leeway with Luka to kind of reset and say, stick with us. We're going to do a full reset and get younger now.
Yeah. I mean, this is a 2 or 3 year deal that we're not, I don't mean 2 or 3 year contract. This is a 2 or 3 year window that we're talking about with this team.
We ran past our
That's
59 alert.
59 alert. Could also just end here.
But guess what? That's the end of our show anyway. It's time for us to get out of here on the DLLS Mavs podcast. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. here on the DLLS Mavs podcast. We will know who the Mavericks will be playing on Sunday, whether it be in Dallas against the Rockets or on the road, Klay Thompson, for a second time against the Golden State Warriors. We will know that officially after tonight's results. So again, tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the DLLS Mavs podcast. Then we are off on Friday for our show. So make sure you come back with us. Really appreciate you joining us here on the DLLS Mavs podcast. For Bobby Corella, Tim Cato, I'm Kevin Gray. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 1 p.m. on the DLLS Mavs podcast. Y'all be good. We'll talk to you later. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.